Okay, so Naruto is kind of weird. Don't get me wrong, I love it and everything, but that has a lot of characters who really just don't get a whole lot to do after they get shown being badass. I mean, there's a lot of them. And for as many characters who got a lot to do, who were very well written and who were just awesome, there are a couple who kind of slipped through the cracks. And probably everybody's favorite example of that is Rock Lee. The man of 1,004 taijutsus, the Hidden Leaf Village's handsome devil, and the man with one of the greatest haircuts in anime history. This is the tale of Rock Lee. We first see Rock Lee during the beginning of the Chunin exams. He's alongside Neji Hyuga and Ten, no known last name apparently. And they honestly look really cool to start. We learned that they're a year ahead of Team 7 and all the other teams. And when we first see Lee take some hits, we're not all that impressed. He gets taken out pretty easily, but he ends up stopping a fight. The gang notices now he probably faked his injuries, and he immediately moves on to flirting with Sakura. Yeah, he's not doing great with it. But he also challenges Sasuke to a fight, and when Naruto tries to take a swing at him and just completely fails, he ends up doing pretty well against Sasuke and pretty much smacking him. Seriously, guys, this is uncomfortable to watch if you're a Sasuke fan. And if you're mixed about Sasuke like I am, it was pretty satisfying. But he gets stopped and decides not to use this technique he's been hyping up. But he says that he actually isn't the strongest. There's actually somebody in his group who's stronger than he is, and we'll get to know him in a little. Even so, this was pretty impressive considering the Sharingan at this point in the series was an incredibly powerful technique. So seeing Rock Lee easily best Sasuke was a pretty awesome sight. Yeah, once again, this was back when the Sharingan was like cool but kind of pedestrian, and now it's, well, whatever the hell the writers want it to be. After they take their test, they head into the Forest of Death to look for the scrolls, and Lee ends up going off on his own and training for a bit, and he ends up saving a squirrel who has a paper bomb attached to it. After he notices what the squirrel has been through, he notices Sakura all on her own against the Sound 3. He ends up taking all of them out and facing Dosu, yet another incredibly underrated character. But Zaku ends up helping him out, and Dosu ends up beating Lee. But he had help to beat Lee, which in my opinion did not make Lee look bad. It took 2 people to stop him. The Ino-Shikacho trio, Neji and Tenten, all show up and help save the day in that regard after Sakura pretty much tries and fails to defend herself. Get used to that. And it's a really cool moment since we get to see the teams interacting with each other, besides Kiba, Shino, and Hinata, but it's still cool to see in my opinion. We also probably get one of my favorite moments in the series because Sakura, after pretty much trashing Lee for his looks very early on, is very grateful to him for saving her. And it actually shows a good bond of friendship between the two, which had some more moments, but overall was never really fully developed. Not only that, but Lee ends up telling her before he leaves that he will be a stronger man the next time they meet. And the Lotus of the Hidden Leaf blooms twice. I'm sure that won't come back at any point. And then we get to the actual fights of the Chunin exams. Now, going back and looking at a lot of these, not a lot of them hold up. They're about halfway good and halfway bad, but I will never trash Rock Lee's fight. Rock Lee faces Gaara. Now, for those of you who didn't know what Gaara was like back then, he was a monster. He was legitimately terrifying. Nobody was able to land a scratch on him until this fight. Lee uses a lot of his speed early on to throw Gaara off balance, but for the most part, it's not working. That is until Guy Sensei says, drop the weights. Might Guy, aka the sensei of Lee, Neji, and Tenten, is basically the only person who's not surprised by any of this. With the exception of Gaara, but Gaara's surprised face shows up the second Lee starts moving because he has a huge boost in speed. After hitting the primary Lotus, the technique he ended up teasing a good while back on Dosu and Sasuke, Rock Lee pretty much ends up getting clapped by Gaara. And this is where things start to slow down a bit. Not in a bad way, but Naruto is known for having a lot of flashbacks. But this is one of those times where everybody universally agrees they're done perfectly. We learn very early on that Rock Lee has no ninjutsu or genjutsu. The only thing he has is taijutsu, which is hand-to-hand combat. And at first, he wasn't good at it. Everybody made fun of him because the Leaf Village is full of some of the worst people in anime I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about the main or the side characters, I just mean the extras, the idiots without names and everything. But they pretty much bully him his whole life. Until at one point, Might Guy says, hey, keep your chin up, and basically encourages him to move forward. Rock Lee also ends up witnessing Might Guy lose a bet to Kakashi and walking around the village 500 times on his hands. He asks Might Guy why he's even doing this because Kakashi wouldn't hold him to it. But Guy tells Lee it's one's own rule. Pretty much a way of saying you have to push yourself past your limits and give yourself your own goals and limits if no one else is going to. He starts to live by this philosophy, and Might Guy pretty much takes Lee under his wing. I mean, they look the exact same. When I first saw the show, I legitimately thought they were father and son, and that is not a joke. But regardless, Might Guy ends up teaching Lee about all of his philosophies, and one of my favorite moments is when Might Guy tells Lee, all the ability in the world is meaningless if you don't believe in yourself. It's also at this point that we see what Neji and Lee's relationship is like. Safe to say they're not friends. While Rock Lee believes that hard work and perseverance can eventually pay off, Neji has this whole spiel about destiny and how everything is predetermined and how you can't change anything. And we all hated him for it when we were kids. Sadly, little did we know in the end he was actually right. Rock Lee never beat Neji, and it was always something he strived for, so Might Guy ended up teaching him a technique that would basically turn the tide. Rock Lee remembers all of this, and he ends up using this technique, as we all know it, the 8 inner gates. And this right here is how Rock Lee won everybody in the fanbase over.
You're that guy. Okay.
This 8 gates transformation was ridiculous. For those of you who don't know, the 8 inner gates are basically the 8 gates of chakra in the body. Once you open them, they basically remove the limits in your body, but the more you open, the worse for where your body will become, but you'll gain so much more power. And if you open all 8 of them, congrats, you're a god, but you're also gonna die, because your body will just burn out, basically. He opens 5 of the gates against Gaara and completely destroys him. Seriously, this is one of the most uncomfortable fights at first. But then you realize just how badass it is. One of the hardest working people who was a complete nobody at first in his life became one of the strongest people in the show. Seriously, everybody was watching this. Everybody was excited for this when I was a kid. All the other fights got 1 episode, 2 episodes. Some people didn't even get a full episode fight. This got 3 episodes, including all the flashbacks. And not a single person was complaining. One of our newest favorite characters had become a genius in our eyes, and in my opinion, one of the awesomest things about this is the acknowledgement from everyone, and the fact that Lee looks at Neji and thinks to himself, do you see me, Neji? I was saving this move for you. And then the good times have to end, because Gaara has to be a jerk and break his arms and legs. Not cool, dude. And sadly, things take a turn here, because it's revealed that Lee, with his injuries, may never be able to be a ninja again. But before that, we see Lee stand up. And he is still willing to fight, but it's not through brain power or anything, it's sheer willpower. It's incredible, it's harrowing, it's honestly incredibly powerful, and you can't not get through this without crying. I'm sorry. If you don't cry through this, then you probably don't have a soul, but that's just me. We then see a couple of episodes later that Sakura is getting flowers for Sasuke, and when Ino calls her out for it, She actually says she's getting flowers for both Sasuke and Lee, which, once again, is one of my favorite parts just because it shows that Sakura is not completely boy crazy, for the most part. But Ino and Sakura get to the hospital and see that Lee is still pushing himself. He's still doing push-ups, he's still trying to get better, he's still trying to nurse his injuries. He ends up snapping at the nurse, and he ends up failing to do his push-ups in a completely heart-wrenching scene. We catch up with Lee several episodes later, and he's doing his best to cope with his injuries, but when Tsunade returns, basically everybody tells him, oh, just see Tsunade about your injuries. Little do we know that Tsunade has seen Lee, and she has said any surgery done to him would be 50-50 at best when it comes to fixing him, and if it fails, Lee is going to die. And at this point, Lee is basically willing to give up. He's basically willing to move on. He's not happy about it, but you can tell he has no hope left in his voice and in his movements. The one solace to this is that, once again, Sakura finds him and ends up giving him flowers to comfort him over his injury. She seems to be the one person who's basically acknowledging his feelings throughout it, because Naruto is pretty much as dense as a brick wall. It's kind of hard to watch it sometimes. I'm so glad Naruto ended up actually maturing. Finally, we get to the 100th episode of Naruto, and in my opinion, one of the best episodes they've ever done. Might Guy finds Lee and tells him, you need to get the surgery. You need to get through this, because if you don't, you will live your life in pain worse than what you're feeling right now. And we end up seeing just how much Might Guy means to Lee, because we'd seen a bunch of comedic moments between the two, and we'll end up seeing several later down the line, but it is still brilliant. It's still heart-wrenching. It's a beautiful episode that I feel like everybody has to watch at least 2 or 3 times to fully get. And at the end, Might Guy says, get the surgery, and if you die, I will die right alongside you. I'm not crying. My eyes are just sweating from the power of youth. Shut up. At the beginning of the Sasuke Retrieval arc, we see Neji and Lee talking, and Neji pretty much says, Lee, your surgery, I guess it went well, which always kind of bothered me as a kid that we just magically learned, oh, he's okay. Cool. But apparently this was an anime-only thing. In the manga, Lee was just about to have his surgery. But they recruit Neji, and the gang heads off to save Sasuke. We don't see Lee for a good bit after that, but we see Naruto basically get destroyed by Kimimaro, and it's... I'm not gonna lie, Naruto, you looked pretty sad in this fight. Sasuke escapes, and Kimimaro is about to kill Naruto, until... Now that is how you do an intro. Ah, that was awesome. Things don't go well in the fight, though. Lee is pretty much outclassed, primarily due to the fact that his injuries are still a thing, and the fact that Kimimaro is awesome. Incredibly underrated and underutilized, but still awesome. And then he asks to take his medicine, and Kimimaro lets him. Huh, nice guy. Of course, if you know Naruto, it's not medicine, it's sake, and we get Drunken Fist Rock Lee versus Kimimaro, and for such a short fight, it is hilarious, badass, it's everything. It's one of the best fights in the series in my opinion, despite how short it is, and I'd like to think that Lee would have used this more often, if he got more stuff to do. Sadly, the sake wears off, but Lee is saved by Gaara of all people, and seems to hold no ill will after everything. But after the fight and Gaara insults Might Guy, that seems to be where Lee gets angry, once again showing just how close Lee and Guy are. He didn't seem to want to get revenge on Gaara, but he probably did by recommending Gaara a barber in Boruto, because Gaara's hair is just... I've been over Gaara's hair in Boruto. It's the worst thing ever. Let's just leave it at that. Then we get to Shippuden, where Rock Lee, hold on. That's actually kind of it. Now, I would love to rehash what everybody else has said. Rock Lee didn't get enough to do in Shippuden. Rock Lee and Neji should have fought in Shippuden, etc., blah, 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 blah. But I want to talk about one thing they did right with Rock Lee. Something that not a lot of people talk about, and sadly I still feel like people won't talk about now that I've said it. And that is give him one of the greatest things of all time. Rock Lee and his ninja pals. This show is so goddamn weird. It is so bizarre. It's basically Bobobo, a show that I probably will have to talk about at some point. But it's basically that show, but somehow finds a way to be even stranger in the fact that they actually give Tenten screen time. I really wish I was joking about that, but it's a fun ride. It almost makes up for how they did him in Shippuden. Almost. He ends up with a son named Metal Lee, somebody whose mom we still don't know, last I checked, and this is kind of where I would have changed things, because in my opinion, Rock Lee should have ended up with Sakura. Now hold on, let me explain. Their relationship did not start off the best, thanks to, in partly to Lee being really creepy and Sakura being shallow, but they ended up becoming very close friends later on, and an actual believable friendship. Sure, Lee still liked Sakura, but he was a lot more nice about it in Naruto and Shippuden, not the Rock Lee show. He was weird about it then. But it was still a nice dynamic they had. It would have been nice if Sakura had moved on from Sasuke and I guess technically Naruto at some point, and actually found a way to be happy with Lee. They didn't have to be married at some point in Boruto, but at least show something to where they're kind of close. I don't know. But yeah, Rock Lee is a pretty underutilized character, especially with all of his hype. But it's amazing just how much of an impact he's had. To this day, people still talk about his fight versus Gaara. People still talk about him dropping the weights. People still talk about his Hidden Lotus abilities. People have labeled Rock Lee as an inspiration. Many fans have said that they have gone on to live better lives because of all the lessons Rock Lee tried to and eventually did teach us. He's an incredible source of power, strength, and just an ability of never giving up and believing in yourself, even when everybody else laughs in your face. There are non-anime fans who know little to nothing about Naruto, but will always claim that they love Rock Lee. He's a character who we all wanted more from, but at the same time, we all love what we got from him. Do I feel like he got shafted? Yes. Do I feel like they completely ruined his character? I wouldn't say so. I felt like they did a good job with what they had, but there still should have been more. And as great as the Rock Lee show is, there still should have been more for him. But in my mind, Rock Lee is one of the best things about Naruto, one of the best things about anime, just one of those characters who I'll remember for the rest of my life. Let me know you guys' thoughts on Rock Lee and just all of his developments, and who do you think the mom is, because I'm still trying to figure that out. But like, subscribe, comment, all that other jazz. Check out our editor because he is lovely, because I feel like I have to say that at this point, because otherwise, what am I even doing? But I'll catch you guys next time. This has been Alex of the Anime Egotist saying, see you next time. Also, curry of life. Okay, now I'm done.